Hello and welcome to Mediumship Matters with me, Hannah McIntyre. And today I'm very excited to be bringing yet another special guest to your ears. Today I'm speaking to Canadian medium Amy Brookes from Intuitive Rising, who you may know from a month ago, 2 months ago, when I was on her podcast. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm really happy to have you and to talk about all of your work and because you do a lot of different stuff. I've been round your website and having a look. You've got fingers in lots of pies, so I can't wait to pull them all out and have a taste. That sounds weird.
I'm a busy bee.
You're welcome. So first of all, Amy, the first question I always ask on my podcast, because I always want to know, how did you start? How did you get into this?
How did I get into mediumship? Well, it's one of those things that for me, I can see that in hindsight, I've always kind of been very drawn and interested too. And I always, now I would tell another, pay attention to those things that continually show up in your awareness or in your life. But I've always known that I had, leaning towards the psychic or having psychic abilities. I wouldn't have necessarily called myself a psychic back in the day, but I would have said that I was very tuned in. I would have said, I have ESP, things like that. So I've always
Mhm.
been tapped in that way. But in terms of my mediumship connection, that happened, things started to happen in like late 2016. So I had my third baby then. And I made a really good friend at this time who some of you may know. You may not even know her. Her name is Natasha Mack. She is also a Canadian medium. Her and I got to be really good friends. We were expecting at the same time our last babies, and her mediumship, her psychic abilities developed in this time. And I really feel like being friends with her, being her guinea pig, so she would practice all her readings on me, really started to speed up and accelerate my own kind of abilities as well. So things were happening. I certainly was experiencing what I now know was spirit and spiritual visitations. Like if I'd hang out with a friend, I would just kind of pick up on something. But the real thing happened in January of 2018.
Mhm.
I live away from my parents. I live about 1,500 kilometers away. And my dad went in for routine kind of day surgery, left the local hospital. And after he was, he was cleared, he was good out of the hospital, or no, sorry, he wasn't out of the hospital, but he was in recovery. He developed some unforeseen complications. So just a series of random things began to happen. And so he was in the hospital for 6 days.
Wow.
And on that last night, when he was supposed to be released the next morning, he passed away
Oh,
very
Amy.
early. Yeah, sitting in the chair, the little hospital chairs,
Yeah.
sitting there, with his bag packed, waiting for my mother to pick him up. And my mother found him. And at that point, we think he might have been gone about 30 minutes or so. Alerted the staff. They came rushing in, worked on him for like a half an hour to get his heart beating again. And at that, they did succeed with that. But I knew that he was gone. It was just his body. His heart was beating. They put him in ICU so that the family had a chance to say goodbye. And I had to do that over the phone because I didn't live close by. And everyone said to me, you're never going to make it here. You're never going to make it here in time. I think it's best you say goodbye over the phone. And then, if you want to try to make it here afterwards, you can, but I think you should do this. So I
Mhm.
did. And in those moments, I mean, you can never prepare yourself for that. But, I said what I could say and had to say. And in those moments, as I was saying goodbye to my father, in my mind's eye, I was being shown the room that he was in. So it felt like a bird's eye view of him in the bed,
Wow.
as if I was like seeing it through his own spirit's eyes. Like I could see his body in the bed, I could see the machines, I could see the door number. I knew what the door number was. I knew what the nurse's name was on the whiteboard. I knew what the weather was like outside, and I knew who was in the room and what they were wearing. And after I said goodbye, I remember sharing this, like I was on speakerphone afterwards with the other people that were in the room. So my siblings, my mother, and I kind of was mentioning what I was experiencing, but all of us were kind of in an out of body experience because of
Yeah.
this traumatic event. So none of us were really like taking it very seriously or putting too much stock into it at that moment. But I knew what I had experienced with my dad's spirit, and he was showing me that what he was witnessing. Um, and some of the messages that came through for me from him was, I don't want to go, but I have to. And we all do have that time, and none of us know when it's going to be, but when it's time, it's time.
Mhm.
And this was my time. And so he made me, feel at peace about this passing, even though it was traumatic and unexpected, because it
Wow.
was going to happen anyways, is what he made me feel. I get chills as I say that. And then he said, the doctors are going to say I'm going to pass today. But in keeping with his personality, which was very, he had a very strong, stubborn kind of personality. He's like, this is me, so I'm going to fight like hell. So I'm actually not going to leave until tomorrow.
Mhm.
But they're not going to believe that if you say that to them. They'll say, no, couple hours at most. And he said, I want you to know that I'm around and I will never not be around, and that you can communicate with me. And so that was a life-changing event, and opened this world up to me. And
Wow.
I always laugh. I think it's a really funny kind of cosmic joke, when I tell this story, because my father is now, he steps forward as like a guide, especially around my mediumship. I feel like he helps me with my business and making connection with people. But he was the biggest skeptic. And if I would talk about stuff like this, or my mom and I might like watch somebody online doing this work, he'd be like, these are like Looney Tunes, right? He thought it was absolutely ridiculous. So, I remember one of the first things I said to him in spirit was, who's laughing now? Who's laughing
Yeah.
now, Dad?
I love it, because you get links like that, don't you, when you're working, and their loved ones are like, I'm hoping they'll come in, but they didn't believe in this, and this, it's
Doesn't
normally
matter.
a man, shuffles
Yes.
in with kind of, yeah, I thought it was a load of crap,
Yes.
and yet I want to talk to my daughter, so
Mhm.
can I please speak to her, please? And you're like, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, we know. That's
Yeah.
an incredibly moving, and thank you for sharing that story, because
You're
that's a
welcome.
lot,
It's a lot.
that situation, that surprise and that shock of that passing. Do you feel like, because of your dad's personality, because often I find when I'm working evidentially with people that have passed in very quick, unexpected circumstances, their soul often sort of communicates, that's how I wanted to go. I would not have wanted to go in a drawn out kind of fashion. Do you feel like that is your
Yes, I
dad?
do. Or
Yeah.
versus like having a very long drawn out illness and
Yes.
suffering.
Yeah.
Yes, I do feel like that. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And so he's still working with you now and overseeing
Mhm.
stuff.
Mhm.
I love.
Anytime I have a reading with someone, they'll say, I smell burning wood, which this is the way that he comes through. It's the smell of campfire, right? And I'll go, oh, Dad's here, right? And the same message, the same kind of things will come through, like he's working as a guide for you, he's doing behind the scenes work. I really feel like my dad and we definitely had some sort of soul contract. Now,
Wow.
the interesting thing is, I talk, about this experience and this connection to my dad. That's so beautiful and lovely. But my dad and I had a very challenging relationship in life. My dad was not the kind of dad that I wanted or necessarily like needed.
Mhm.
So was not emotionally there, or there was always a disconnect. It always felt awkward. It wasn't the kind of relationship would be like, I love you. It was always awkward. I wanted that,
Yeah.
but we felt awkward around each other. And there's been so much healing in communicating with him and feeling his own spirit, because there's like no secrets when you connect to spirit, or if spirit connects with each other, like that they see each other transparently, and
Yeah.
there's like a deep understanding, even if maybe it wasn't something ideal that happened, but you get the person.
Yes.
And I feel like he gets me and I get him now. So the relationship has repaired and healed itself. And I realized that, he just had trauma and he had things, and that was part of his life path, but we're actually way more similar than I ever thought. We just express it in different ways.
Isn't that interesting? And that, I
Mhm.
suppose, must really help you in your mediumship as well, because you do get those sitters who really want to hear from someone, but equally don't want to hear from them at the same time because of the relationship. Or like I've had in a demonstration where I had someone, no one was taking it, and people were trying to take it, and they were saying, yeah, but I can't take this. And I was like, no, this is right. And yeah, I could take it, but I can't take that. And I was like, no, I've got to hold it. And then someone goes, oh, it's me, but I don't want to talk to him. And you can understand then all aspects of that very complicated choice in healing, because you could have chosen to say, I don't want you as a guide.
I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't want your help.
And what about the rest of your family? Because then they have watched this be this trigger and this springboard in a complete change. What did you do before mediumship?
So my background, like my education is in psychology. So I always had a plan to like be a therapist, but then like baby number 1 and baby number 2 happened. And I was a stay-at-home mom for many, many years. I've worked in healthcare, but like as in an admin kind of way, an administrative way, human resources, community health, always been very connected. It's funny, I've always worked in a hospital. Whenever I have worked, I've worked in a hospital. I've always been drawn to that energy, but like didn't ever want to be a frontline worker or a nurse. Yeah, no, I was a stay-at-home mom at the time that this happened.
Which is the hardest job in the world. Jeez.
Yeah.
Give me any job other than that.
I know. And at the time, my youngest was only 2 years old when this all began for me. So yeah, but I also feel like that allowed me, just for my own personal path, allowed me to kind of have that time to process and to absorb and really kind of tinker and work with it.
Yeah.
Because my oldest 2 were in school at this point. So I just had my little guy and he was very independent and just kind of liked to do his own thing, even though he was a toddler. If I had been working full time or, very busy otherwise, I might, I always say like everything happens for a reason. I truly believe that, for me at least. So maybe I wouldn't have had the awareness or been as like open to receiving that information. I don't know. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
My family has been, my mom is very interested. The first reading I've ever done actually was for my mother. Oh, wow. I've done readings for my siblings. Everybody's very interested in it. Nobody was kind of like, oh, you're nuts or you're crazy. It's like, okay, that's Amy. That's what Amy does. And everybody's been interested in it. I do believe that this comes through my mother's line. My mother is quite intuitive, but doesn't fully feel confident in it, but I see that in her. And her mother, my grandmother, who just recently passed away, she was very intuitive. And I've known right from the get-go when this started, I'm like, this comes from Nanny. Wow. And I'll tell you, about 4 years ago, she just randomly told me out of nowhere, did you know that my grandmother who raised me, so this is my grandmother telling me about her grandmother, was a medium and a tea leaf reader? And I said, excuse me, you're just telling me this now?
Yeah. What?
And she said, yeah, she used to, like people would come in at night through the side door and I'd pretend I was in bed, but really be sitting on the stairs, listening in on what was happening. And I'm like, help me. Wow. But that really confirmed that like link through that maternal line, because my grandmother would always say that we had ESP, as my mom and I always say to each other as well, but there's more than that.
I love it. I love it. Now, do you think that, see, I love this because I was into psychology. I started a degree in psychology, which I dropped out of and then drank my student loan. But that's a different story on Hannah's journey. But I was interested in it. And the scientific nature. And, if you've got a skeptical father as well, because recently I've been exploring on the podcast about the link between a healthy bit of skepticism actually pushing you a bit further in your mediumship. Do you feel like your dad's spirit brings that? Do you feel like your scientific background brings that?
Yeah, I haven't thought about that, but I would say that. And I have gone on record in spite of saying a few times publicly that although I'm open to this and I deeply believe, there's also like a hint of natural skepticism with me, which is why it's so important for me and why my intention has always been to be an evidential medium, because I want that. I want it for me, but I also want it for my client. Yeah. I want that. And so I think it's a little bit of like, or, there's always a moment after I do a reading where I'm, I just do, where did that come from? How did I do that? And we still get really excited when things come through.
Yeah.
Even though we're doing it every day, right? It's still like, wow, that was so cool how that came through.
Yeah.
And
that sort of soul destroying, fun sucking element of pull it all apart. Was it good enough? Was it evidential enough? Especially I find in demonstrating, was that specific enough that it is that person in the room that it resonates with, and taking it to that next level. So I love that you've got your dad on your team helping you out with that as well.
Mm.
You know, if you were a non-believer, Dad, give me the evidence that would have convinced you. Let's see it. Bring it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he does. He
Yeah,
does. Yeah.
no doubt.
Yeah.
I love it. Now, you are a published author, aren't you, amongst your many hats that you wear? Tell us about your
I
book.
wear I wear a lot of hats, and that used to be an insecurity of mine. That was part of my shadow. I thought I was too flighty. I can't stay with anything. I've got my hands in too many pots, which means I can never really master or become an expert in any one thing because my brain is like recently my spirit guide said, "Amy, your brain is like a 6-lane highway, and I don't want you to stay in one lane.
Yeah.
Weave in and out, right? Do it all." So I've learned to see that as a gift. Yeah, the journey into authorship, that's if you would have asked me when I was 10 years old, what do you want to be when you grow up? It would have been a published author.
Wow.
I wanted to be a novelist for sure. Journalism was exciting to me as well. In fact, when I started university in the first year, I was in a public relations degree, and I took a first year psychology and fell in love, and that was the end of it. I had to do psychology. But I've always wanted to be a published author. And I have a tendency to get overwhelmed with like the steps of how to make things happen. Right. It's like I'll get all excited and I'll have all that energy of like, I'm going to do this. But then it's like how to figure out how to do it is the thing that stalls me. So that's something that I really have to work through. But this I think it was all synchronicity. I do see this, but there was somebody randomly showed up on my Instagram feed one day, and she happened to own a company called The Great Canadian Woman. And at that time, it was a podcast as well as she had like a book series where
Yeah.
she was taking stories of Canadian women who were doing, exciting, amazing things in their own field and then bringing them to the public through a podcast, decided to do a book series. I started following her because I thought she was hilarious, just as I started following you because I thought you were hilarious with your videos I would see on Instagram, and realized that she had this book series. And the second edition, she was looking for authors for the book. So
Wow.
I was leaning towards doing it, and then another friend of mine who's also a Canadian was offering like a card pull on Instagram. When people are like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Just comment and I'll pull a card for you." So I said, "Yes, please." And she pulled up, this is a little bit of synchronicity because I know you had Rebecca Campbell on the podcast recently.
Yes.
One of Rebecca Campbell's cards she pulled for me. And I think the card was something about leaping or a portal and like saying yes. I can't remember the exact card. And I took that as a sign. Okay, I'm meant to do this. This is saying yes, and the choice is yours. Essentially, was a card like that.
Yeah.
So I decided to do it, and so that it was about a 6-month process of slowly writing. It's a book. It's a chapter that I've published, so it's a book like a collaborative book series.
Yeah. Lovely.
Yeah, and I channeled that information. I know I did because
Wow.
I sat down. And I'm telling you, some people were taking months and months and months to do it, right? I sat down in an afternoon and wrote the whole thing. It just flowed out of me. Even the name of the chapter came to me intuitively. I named it Running Towards the Dragon.
Wow.
And I did that because the dragon for me represented the things that kept me small.
Yeah.
And the story is about my lived experiences with anxiety, postpartum, but also throughout my life, and grief and miscarriage, and how I, dealt with all and coped with all of those things, and how I learned that, the dragon, all those challenges in my life was really there to help fuel me and push me forward. It wasn't there to take over. It wasn't there to lead me astray or to harm me. It was there to kind of wake me up. So that's
Wow.
what I wrote about. And I'm actually working on my own book right now. It's in the baby stages, but I'm going to publish my own book very soon.
Amazing.
I'm hoping in the next year and a half because I have a goal for age 45 and I'm 43 and a half right now.
Oh, the heat is on.
The heat is
So
on.
good.
Mhm.
And is that book going to be a biography? Do you know what the theme is yet?
Yeah, I have a title. I'm gonna keep that mum for a
Yeah,
little bit
sure.
longer. I have a title. It's going to be like my own story, And even stories throughout, like client stories and things that have happened, but also there's going to be teaching in it, right? So I wanted to be
Amazing.
able to help people. So there
Yeah,
might be things on the clairs, and then I'll share a story of
how it works.
how that works. I think I'm going to weave teaching with my own personal story.
Amazing. Good.
Hmm.
Sounds
Hmm.
fabulous.
Thank you.
Um, good luck. I
Thank you.
am also writing a book, and it's certainly a labor of love, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Good. Well, that's really good. Now, I saw on your website that you had an NDA aged 6.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that and what that did to you for you?
Yeah. So I always jokingly say that I must have like an angel sitting on my shoulder, because honestly, you could make a lifetime movie about things that have happened to me in my life, especially in the first 20 years, where I could have died and I didn't. I recently learned that I have Jupiter in my 12th house in my astrological chart. And often people will say that people that have Jupiter in the 12th house literally have a guardian angel, or someone that would keep them very safe. There's that little stroke of luck, like, huh, you're safe. And I think that's totally true, because I think I'm on my 8th life when we talk about the 9 lives. Cats have 9 lives. So I was about 6.5 or so. It was a weekend. My mom was like cleaning the house, or something like that. And I remember so vividly, she put on Annie, the original Annie from
Oh,
like
yeah.
1984 or 5 on TV. And she gave me a snack, and it was ants on a log. Do you know what ants on a log are?
Yes, that
Yeah.
is. Now, that is a bit of synchronicity. If you'd asked me yesterday, I would not know what ants on a log is, but I saw it on a
Oh,
meme earlier, and it's celery with peanut butter and raisins on it. Yes.
hmm,
This morning. How weird is that?
very
There we
weird.
go.
Hmm.
So, yes, I do know.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry
Very
on.
interesting. That's synchronicity. That's like the
Yeah.
universe, yeah, connecting and speaking. Yeah, so she gave me that and she said, "Don't jump around, make sure, like, sit up." She was always worried about me choking. I don't know if I was like laying down or jumping around or what I was doing. The next thing I know, I'm choking on a chunk of celery. And it's kind of blurry. I don't remember exactly what happened, but the next thing I know, I'm out on the front step of our house. We lived in a townhouse, and across the street there was a big high-rise apartment building. And she was giving me the Heimlich. And like I did with my dad, when my dad gave me this bird's eye view of himself, I was getting a bird's eye view of myself. So this is, I was like, I was looking down on the scene, and I could see my mom's face, and I could see my face, and I could see that my lips were purple. I could see that I was, losing color. And she was like freaking out, like she was panicking and trying to get this out. I remember going, "Help, help, help." And there was somebody across the street that lived in the apartment building that heard it, a nurse that was like on her way over. But I remember in that moment, I could see everything, I could experience everything. I knew what was happening. I could feel my mom's panic. I didn't feel scared, and I also didn't feel anything that would have been going on in my body. So it's not like I was feeling the pain, or, the thing lodged in my throat. I was outside of my body. And I remember feeling very safe. At the time, in my mind's eye, like, I experienced mediumship. I saw, like a bunch of people around me. I could see them all surrounding me, and they were older. And I didn't recognize anyone at the time. But one woman stepped forward, an older woman, and she said, "It's not time. You have to go back." I was like, "But I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back." Even though I didn't know her and I was only 6 years old, it was felt so safe. I didn't want to go. It was
Yeah.
like warm and float. It was like you're floating in warm air. That's how I can describe it. And everything was very bright color. I have a quote that Spirit gave me. The first thing I ever channeled was this quote: "Why live in black and white when you can live in technicolor?" And that reminds me of this, because it was technicolor where that was.
Wow.
And the next thing I know, I'm back in my body. I'm coughing. I can taste the blood in my mouth. Um, and that was that. We never really talked about it further. It was just kind of like, man, that was scary, and it was like back to business. But I didn't talk about my experience with anyone. But after that, I got a little bit more like philosophical, I guess you would say, for a child. Like, I
Mhm.
remember standing in the school, like a lineup. We had just come in from like recess or lunch, and we were waiting in the line to go back into school. I might have been in grade 3 or 4. and I was talking about reincarnation. It's like talking about how I felt there was an infinite number, or sorry, a finite number of souls, and we just, we could be more than one person at one time in different timelines and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like such a clear memory in my mind. I remember talking about this, and the other kids being like, "Okay," like totally over their heads. But it was just like I had this deep understanding of what happens.
Mhm.
So when I say like I was a little bit of a natural skeptic, I just kind of wanted like, well, show me, show me, show me. It wasn't like prove it, prove it, prove it.
Mhm.
It's just like show me more, show me more, show me more. Because I experienced what I believe was kind of the spirit world. Maybe it was the in between. I don't know what it was, but I know I wasn't in my body anymore, and I certainly wasn't afraid.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So,
Amazing.
mm,
Absolutely incredible. And do you believe that that was instrumental in making you the medium that you are today? Do you feel that
I
that
think
was a
so.
necessary process?
I believe so. And I will tell you also that is not the only time I choked. In my childhood, I choked 3 more times. I almost drowned once. I was in a car accident once, and I was almost abducted when I was a teenager. Um, this is when I say it could be a Lifetime movie. Like, I was walking to work when I was 17 years old in the dead of winter, okay? This is, like, off topic, but not really.
No, I love
Walking
it.
to work, I had my headphones on, I was listening to my Walkman, we're talking about the '90s here,
Yeah.
and there was snowbanks, right? So I'm on the sidewalk, there's a snowbank, and then there's the road. And so I didn't hear anything. I'm hard of hearing also. I will say that. Had my headphones on. Next thing I know is somebody's grabbing me from the inside of the car, grabs the pocket of my winter coat, like leaning out of the car to grab me. And because of the snowbank and because of my coat ripped, like the pocket basically like ripped off. And I was pulled kind of in the snowbank, and this caused a commotion, right? And they took off as fast as they could. They didn't get me. And I went to work. I was obviously like freaking out. I remember feeling like I was having an out of body experience, and I called the police. And later I found out that they were some not so nice people that were trying to pick up girls and women
Wow.
for not so nice purposes. Those kind of things, like just weird things happened in my life. Right. And
Because
it's
I
like,
have this weird vision right now, right, of being your spirit guide and being like, right, she needs to have an NDA, and like trying to jam a bit of celery and peanut butter down your throat so you choke.
yeah,
Like it's
yeah. And then like, let's have her have this brush with death and
yeah,
this brush with death and this brush with death. And I really truly believe that was all purposeful. And I also feel I was saved from it, because it makes no sense that I would have that many brushes with
yeah,
what potentially could have taken me. And I lived to tell the day, and I was not seriously harmed or injured. Like, like I definitely that I think about that often, and I think about just how lucky I am to
yeah,
be here. And when I get down on myself or feel like not confident, I'm like, there's a reason I'm here. There's a
yeah.
reason I wasn't taken. It's not to be high on myself, but it's just like there's a reason I'm here, and it's to help. I think this is why I'm here.
Yeah, and
Is
be
to help
high yourself. But I just can imagine your guides like pulling short straws and going,
yeah,
"Oh, please, I jam the celery in her throat. Don't make me line up the abductors." And then be like, "Well, someone's got to do it, Harold. Come
I
on."
know. It's so funny you say Harold. That's funny. That's funny.
Is it
Um,
good?
mhm. Yeah. Not my
Um,
spirit guide, but yeah.
Interesting. So
Mhm.
you do a huge number of different types of readings, but obviously evidential mediumship seems to be your passion. Is that right? Is that the
Yeah, that's my favorite. That's like kind of the bread and butter. I get excited doing mediumship.
yeah,
100%. Evidential mediumship is my thing. It just feels so beautiful to be in the company of spirit, doesn't it?
yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
have trouble, like, I have to set boundaries with myself, because I have to be like, okay, the session is ending. I need to stop, because I would just like to be in that energy for way longer
yeah,
than
yeah,
the session is. Yeah.
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 For me,
That's
that
my
very much depends on the sitter.
and how you're feeling. You
Yeah,
know what though? You do a lot of events, so you're like with a lot of different people.
yeah,
For me, I
yeah,
haven't branched out into the event. Yeah, like I've done virtual events. I haven't branched out yet to in-person events. So mostly I work with one-on-one clients. But when I started doing this work, people sometimes are like, man, you just like kind of dove right in. right? It was like
Yeah.
you realize you're a medium, and then like 2 months later, you launch your business. Like, what the heck, right? And I didn't do any mentorship or anything. It just like, just gonna do this. This is what I can do. But I think for me, I think that, all of those things that have happened before prepared me for that. I also think that I've been probably doing this for many lifetimes, and that has come up in a past life reading for me.
Ah,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, but it does I used to view it as kind of impulsive, like just jumping into that, but I don't know, it just felt so right. It felt so natural.
Well, I
Um,
mean, look at your reviews. It can't
yeah.
be bad, can it? You know,
No,
it's
oh,
fascinating.
I forgot where I was going with that. I'm sorry to interrupt. I
No.
just realized the point of that story. It was, and now it leaves my head again. Does that ever happen to you?
Oh my God. Yeah. The more you work with spirit, because you have to turn your brain off to work with
I
spirit.
know.
And now I'm barely functioning.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like I'm so scattered. It's like, okay, there's the point. It drops back in and then it leaves again.
Yeah.
Oh, I was afraid. People would say, were you ever afraid of working with spirit? And I'd say, no, spirit is lovely,
Yeah.
lovely bunch of folks. I love spirit. It's the people I was scared of.
For sure. As you
So
should be.
right. So I,
Yeah.
because I'm such a giver and I have trouble with boundaries, and that's something that I'm working on. I'm a bit of a people pleaser in recovery. So I was afraid who was going to be attracted to, to me and for me to do that service for them. So I set my intention with God, source, the universe, to only have people that were aligned with my energy, that were going to feel really good, that was going to feel like that soul connection.
Yeah.
And there's only been maybe 3 in 5 years that didn't feel like that. And every time, those 3 times that that has happened, I'm like, I'm learning something here. Spirit's teaching me something here. But every other connection has felt that ooey gooey, like, oh, I just met like a soul
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah. I have set that intention now. I don't advertise
Good.
really or share that I'm offering readings for that reason, because if you want to find me, you'll look me up and you'll know,
You'll
and
find
you'll want to
me.
work with me. Whereas I did fall into that sort of trap of promo all the time and stuff like that. And you
Yeah.
create your own experience, don't you?
That's right. I don't do any of that either. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm on social media, so people know what I do, but I don't like do any paid ads or anything like that. Cause I'm
Yeah.
like, if you're going to find me, you're going to find me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do ads, because otherwise you don't get bloody seen at all. But I don't
I
advertise
know. Well, that's what's
because
happening right
social
now with
media is just,
Instagram. Yeah. Yeah. I know. Yeah.
yeah. Thanks, Meta, if you're listening.
Mhm.
So now, what is your top tips for somebody that's right at the beginning of their journey and learning to connect to spirit? What advice would you give them?
The Whopper. I know that this work, like perceiving and connecting to spirit, can be very different for each person, right? So I do
Mhm.
not think there's like a one size fits all like manual for it. Um, I think mainly it's like practice, 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 trust, trust, trust. That's so
Yeah,
hard,
true.
right? It's like, um, for me, I think you have to get really comfortable with what you're doing. I think that when you're working with spirit, you face a lot of your own fears, even if they're unconscious, and you face your shadow, especially if you're then take that connection and you create a business with it. Like your business is going to teach you where you need to grow very quickly, right?
Yes.
So for me, it's just like consistency, practice. Um, Shadow work is important. Like,
Mhm.
where do you feel that insecurity? Is there like a block that's keeping you? Some people will say, well, I experience spirit sometimes, but like not all the time. And that's what would have happened with me too. Like I experienced spirit for years through dreams. I've had
Yeah,
dream visitations with loved ones where they were communicating with me and telling me things, but I didn't know how to turn that on when I was awake. I f
absolutely.
It was just like I felt like I had to just wait for them to come to me. And the real key moment when I connected to my dad, what he made me realize is this is a two-way communication. So you don't just have to wait for you yourself to perceive me. You can initiate conversation with me.
Love
So
it.
right? So something that turned around for me, I was like listening to somebody invited me to like this 1 hour. Do you know who Lindsay Marino is? She's an American medium.
No.
Well, I haven't been mentored by her or anything, but she is a mediumship teacher. She was offering this free like Facebook Live. This is back like in I don't know, 2018 or something, for lunchtime. Somebody invited me. I joined the tail end of it, and she was explaining how to kind of like take evidence a step further. So it's like, okay, say you see a bicycle in your mind's eye, right? Like you're initiating contact with your dad. You're
Mhm.
thinking of him, you start talking to him, and then you see a bicycle. It's like, okay, don't just stop with the bicycle. What else is going around? What are you smelling? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? Like, use all of your senses, and then just keep talking, and keep being open to seeing what you're seeing. And because it's a story, right? It's like, it's
Yeah.
a puzzle. It's a puzzle. And so for me, that really helped, knowing that it was a two-way street, that we
Mhm.
can initiate too, knowing that, what I asked myself, what is the difference between me, like, having, like, my dad just randomly dropping into my mind's eye
Yeah.
versus me initiating contact with him?
Mhm.
There's no difference. It's
Yeah.
it's the same, right? So for me, it was just practicing with that.
Yeah.
It was talking and seeing what happened, and that began to happen with friends. So I remember the first time this kind of happened for me. I was chatting to, she was a new friend. We met in like a due date kind of baby club, and I knew she had lost her mother, and we were chatting about something, and then all of a sudden in my mind's eye, I saw like this image. She showed me all these things, gave me smells. And so I just said, the first time I felt brave enough to do this, I must have felt like inherently that it would be okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't approach people randomly and do cold readings.
Yeah.
But in this case, I was just like, hey, I'm kind of experiencing something. I kind of feel like I'm like maybe a medium, and things are beginning for me. I feel like your mom might be here. Is it okay, like, for me to tell you, like, relay what I'm seeing? Like, can't promise anything, right? But like, can
Yeah.
I just share
Yeah.
this with you? And she was like, oh my God, yes, please. So I shared these things with her, and she's like, I was just doing that. It was like her mom was showing me like old basement stairs, going downstairs, doing the laundry, using the fabric softener, and then like walking back up the stairs and finding a dime on the stairs. So she was showing me all this in slow motion. She's like, Amy, I literally just went, I still smell it on my hands. I literally just did that. And I found a dime when I was walking back up the stairs. And then I started talking to you. And so I was like, oh, but I think sometimes it takes also feeling brave enough to share
Yeah, for
some
sure.
things with
Yeah.
trusted people, because otherwise you'll just think you're just making stuff up in your head. Like, I thought for my whole life this was my imagination.
Yes,
Why do I always
exactly.
see this old lady every time I see my friend? Like, why do I just keep seeing this old lady in my head? I never connected it to be like, that's her grandmother. I
No,
just thought it was my imagination.
you're just a weeny
So
bit nuts.
I'm just nuts. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know.
I know.
I
It's
wouldn't
so
tell
funny.
anybody that. Yeah. Like,
Yeah,
I
it's
wasn't ever going to share that, but
yeah. It's so funny when you look back. It's always when you look back, you go, oh,
oh, okay.
oh. But when you're in it, you're just in it and having this weird experience, and that's life, and you carry on. A bit like nearly choking to death, having to have the Heimlich, and then it just never gets mentioned again. You'd think in those
It's so
those moments would be
that you
brought
would
up.
talk about it.
Yeah. Every Christmas we'd
You
be
know
like,
what's funny?
thank God Amy's still here. Thank goodness.
Never
And
talked about it.
yeah,
Never. And it's so funny you say that, because in my first podcast episode, I tell my story and I tell that. And the theme of my life, which I discovered through telling my story on the podcast, is after each of these things happened, I would say, and then we never talked about it. And like all these things happened, and then we never talked about it, right? So it's like, so this is why I'm here, so we can talk about this stuff. Like, we need
yeah.
to talk about it. But that's the theme of my life. Just, oh, okay, that weird thing happened. Okay, like, let's, like,
Yeah.
it's nothing.
And it was, I love it. So obviously you've got your podcast, Intuitive Rising, you're doing readings, past life, deep soul, higher self, inner child, and your tarot and oracle. So you do a lot of stuff. I think, my opinion, and I know you didn't ask for it, but you're getting it anyway, Amy, is that there's obviously a point where you shouldn't stretch yourself ridiculously thin, but
Yep.
actually an interest in lots of different things. You could be working on your card readings, but that will help your evidential. You can work on your evidential, and that will help your spiritual assessments, or your deep soul, or whatever it is you're working on. So I find that it all interlinks. It's the more you do, it's not out of balance, if that makes sense.
No, they're all connected. Like
Yeah.
one helps the other. And I just like, I look at this. I have this on my desk. It says, say yes to yourself. I say yes to myself. So when I get excited about something, I'm like, okay. Do you know anything about human design?
Oh, that is nuts. Right. Oh my God, the synchronicities we are having. I went for lunch with Amanda, who's my friend, who everyone knows about from the podcast. We were at lunch 3 hours ago, and she was talking to me about human design. What were you going to say about human design, Amy?
I like geek out on human design. I've been geeking out on human design for 3+ years now. It is something that eventually I might offer. I'm also learning astrology. I have all these things happening in the background. They all connect. So I'm a 5/1. When you do your human design,
Yeah.
you can go to mybodygraph.com. There's you can do your free body graph.
Okay.
I'm a 5/1 profile. So that's like there's different energy types, right? It's going to look really complicated to you, but honestly, you can break it down in very simple chunks. My profile is called the heretic investigator. Okay. So it's like, the 1 stands for the investigator, which means that in order for me to feel safe and secure in life, I need to know all the things. I need to dive deep. I need to research. And then my 5, the heretic, needs to share. But the 5 is the most projected upon profile. So, whether you're held up on a pedestal as being like, oh, she's like a goddess, she knows everything, she's a savior, she can save me, or she's going to hell, she's working for the devil, right? I'm going to get both of those as a 5,
Yeah.
but needing to know, regardless, none of it has anything to do with you. So the praise or the crap, none of it's about you. It's about somebody else. And you're just standing there like the mirror, showing other people their own projections about themselves and their own possibilities. So actually learning that has made it easier for me to stand, tall in my mediumship.
Yeah.
I think it's really purposeful that I'm a 5/1 in my mediumship, because I'm like, of course I would be projected on as a medium doing this work in person, in public. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what you are.
Well, yeah, I'm going to have to do it. And then I'll have to let everybody on the podcast know, because they're all going to be
Yeah.
wondering now.
Yeah.
That
I'm a
is fascinating.
5/1 emotional generator.
That is so. I thought the ants on a log was synchronized,
No.
but now you've and while you were talking, this beautiful orb came in on you and just went across the screen. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will have seen it. It was complete. I went, but you were mid-sentence.
Do you know how often people will notice, right? Because my videos, when I record my podcast, go on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Do you know how anytime, almost every time I record a podcast, orbs show up? Now, I don't know if it's because like I only do readings as of this time, because I haven't started doing public events in this office, in this chair. So it's almost like this is a little portal, because I don't do readings anywhere else. So I feel like when I sit down, it's like, oh, like all the,
Yeah.
the
I
spiritual
love it.
orbs. Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's a nod too, that's something that I maybe should do, because I'm super interested in it. And
Yeah.
I love it. I find it fascinating. And you know how that came? You know how that came to me? I'll tell you.
Wow.
I didn't know anything about human design. If this was like early 2020, I was doing intuitive guidance readings for people, which is like what I call a psychic reading, right?
Yeah.
But I don't believe in fortune telling. So I word it as intuitive guidance.
Like it.
Let me guide you, and intuitively to how to get this thing that you want, or what's blocking you from that thing that you want. So I started doing those, and in like a 3-month period, I was picking up on words that weren't familiar to me, like manifester, manifesting generator, projector, generator. And I'm like, what the hell, right? And then there was like, I remember I said to somebody, I think your son might be a manifesting generator, and he really needs choice. So, asking him, do you want to eat this, or do you want to wear these shoes or these shoes? I think would be really helpful. And then afterward, I said, I think this has to do with human design, but like, I don't know anything about human design. It's like I'm channeling human design. And then, that client like Googled it, figured out her son's chart, and was like, oh my God, Amy, he's a friggin' manifesting generator. That happened 5 or 6 times.
Wow.
And I went, okay, the universe is asking me to study human design.
I love
So
it.
I started to study it. So I think it's
Fascinating.
interesting. I think it's interesting. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, we're at time, but you answered the next
Yeah.
question, which was what's next for you. And I can tell you've got your fingers in new
All the
irons
things.
and irons in fire, fingers in pies. There's something going on there. Thank you so much. It's
you.
been fantastic to talk to you.
Yeah.
Obviously, I will put a link to your website in the show notes so that everyone can come check you out.
Mhm.
And I've really loved talking to you.
I loved it too. It felt like a good energetic match and high vibe. And
Yeah,
yeah.
really good.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for having me.